Hey guys, welcome back to another brush pack review. I guess that's what you would call them. Today we're going to be taking a look at the Colorbox Studio for Procreate by Eliza Moreno illustration. I actually have two different brush packs from her and absolutely love them. So we'll be eventually doing both of them, but today we're starting with this one. So as you can see, this is available on the Design Cuts website. It is a $10 pack. It is included in their kind of like bundle benefits whenever you do purchase more than one pack. It comes with an extended license included for personal use, commercial projects, and professional support. This set includes 25 different brushes. There is a list of all the names. I love the names in this set. I think they're super fun. And also, I feel like one of the big things that like grabbed my attention with this collection is the graphics that she made to like show what the brushes can do, because it has a nautical underwater look, and as you can see, it also says mermaid edition, which I never noticed until now, but it definitely feels like something that I would gravitate towards. So that's one of the reasons I bought this. And actually I bought this set, I think my account said August 25th of last year, so I've been using it for a while. So here is a peek at like the samples of what these brushes can do. They're very, very textured based on looking at this and just what I know from my use of them. Yeah, they apparently are based off of pencil textures. I don't necessarily use brushes often and think, oh, this needs to be a pencil texture or this needs to be a paint texture. And when I do, I don't really like look at what the brush was qualified as. I kind of just go with it. So we are going to be switching over to Procreate to test all these out. I have opened up a canvas that is just my screen size. I am working on the new 2021 iPad Pro, the 12.9 screen, and we've got the screen size canvas up. So I went ahead and re-downloaded this set so that way whenever we are swatching them today, they are all exactly as they are whenever you purchase a set, back to kind of like your factory settings, which you can always do. But I actually don't know if I've made a ton of changes to these. If anything, it's just the size, but I wanted it to be the default size over here. As always, when I do these brush reviews, I tend to use the same color. I use this dark blue, which is actually like what I use as my sketching color when I do my sketches. So I will have the hexadecimal code in the description box down below if you do want to use this exact color. Like I said, it's my go-to sketching color because I don't like to use black. This is just what I kind of use. So let's start doing this. Apparently I'm spitting on my screen. Sorry about that. The first brush that we have is called Pearl. This one looks like a really nice textured, kind of like, it looks like it's going to have a very defined edge, which is really nice. Definitely if you're like putting down a whole bunch of color or you're just like creating your shapes. So we're going to go in. Wow, okay, so that's pretty big, even though we're working like pretty far down here on the size scale. It's about like a 15. And if I go super light, you can see that it is very light, but if I go harder, it gets bigger and much darker. If we go on top of the colors, it definitely starts to fill in, but there's still some like empty space, but of course you can go all the way. When I look at the size of the brush, you can see it's kind of like oval based. So actually if you needed a whole bunch of like ovals to create a neat pattern or a texture, that'd be pretty sweet looking. Lettering, like I said in my last video, I don't do lettering to know if this would be a good one, but it does have a very good form and shape. It does give you defined edges, which is nice, but good texture in the middle. And I feel like if I were to use this brush, I would be using it to like fill in a lot of area, or I would be using it to kind of like create a shape, because it does create shapes pretty well. I'm going to erase that because we have a lot more to do on the sheet. But overall, it's a really nice brush. It feels like it has a slanted like point. I don't know if that makes any sense. It just feels like slanted when I'm working with it. I think because it's not like a rounded brush, it's more the oval, so it gives you that nice slant of a line if you are going crazy with it and working. So we're going to get rid of some of those, but enough that you can still see it. That one is called Pearl. The next one is called Alabaster, and this one I do actually know that I use on a regular-ish basis. Like I said, I have like 3 or 4 different brush packs that I float between all the time when I'm illustrating. Now this one has a really neat texture. So actually when you look at it, I feel like it reminds you of if you were working on a canvas. It gives you like that canvas texture. It is very soft. It does have like little frayed edges or soft edges, I guess you would say. And the more that you go over it, it does fill in completely, but it still leaves you with a very, very soft edge. I feel like this would be a really good brush to actually use with your smudge brush and like smudge things around and mix colors. For lettering, I do feel like this has like a nice flow to it. It is pressure sensitive, but you're not going to get like defined edges because of the soft edge. The more that you go over it, it does fill in. I think I may have already said that. But yeah, I really like this brush. I use this a lot for like shading because it does give you a very soft kind of like natural fade shade, which is really nice. The next shade is called Cotton, and Cotton is another one of those that's really good for adding shading. I like to add this like when I'm creating sky illustrations or like ocean. It just adds a really nice kind of scattered texture because as you guys can see here, like, well, let's go to a clean spot. Whenever you draw on the canvas, it's not all the same color. So you've got lighter sections, you've got little darker like pigments going in, and actually this would be really good for like creating a sand texture because you would get that contrast. And if you build up, it does build up completely if you want it to, but I like the like just the contrast. I feel like that's a really good. Also, if you use it kind of like a stamp and you stipple it, that's just like really good for like making a cloud, or maybe you're painting a sunset and you want some nice little texture and color variation. That one's just going to layer really nice and give a lot of good texture, which hints this whole like texture brush. But Cotton I really, really like and do use in like water and sky scenes, which I do a lot of. The next brush is called Daisy, which matches my nails. This one, again, is a really nice texture brush. As you guys can see, this does not have a defined edge. It does have like scattered out. So this is definitely not a good brush for like line art per se. This is definitely a good, I'm adding texture to a shape, or maybe I'm on alpha lock and I'm adding like some shading. The more that you build up, you do get a fuller color. And it also, like the last brush that we were looking at, Cotton, it has that variation of colors in it. When you stipple it, you kind of like get that overlap again. Really good for like a grainy texture again with like sand, creating just very like natural elements and adding texture to them. I feel like is the best way to use that one. Latte, fun name, and actually I could totally go for one of those. This one is really, really light, as you guys can see, but again, it has that like contrast of the texture where you've got like, if this were like a pencil or a pen or paint, and it's almost got like little specks of like pigment in it, but I feel like it's also pressure sensitive, I might add. The more that you do with it, the like randomer shapes that you get, like there's a really big one that popped up, and I feel like this again is really good for adding texture on the ground. I could see this being used for shaded texture because like whenever I do a lot of like ocean and like water illustrations, and when I'm doing those, I like to add like something to the coastline that makes it look like the sand has been wet, like the water was there, but also still has like the shell bits that you would see on the beach where the ocean kisses the shoreline. And I feel like this would be a really good representation of that because it's got the little specks that will be more saturated if you're using it on a blending mode or something to that extent. So I really like this one for that aspect. Again, not a great liner per se, and not really one to get a good fill for like a color fill, because as I go over this, I'd have to go over it for a really long time if I wanted to really color it in. But again, I feel like this is going to be really good for shading. So maybe you were drawing a circle and you wanted to add shading, be really good on a piece like that. I think I actually used this on a moon piece that I did where I was like trying to make the moon glow because it was a strawberry moon and I was illustrating that, and I wanted it to have like this like mysterious glow around it reflecting in the ocean, and I feel like this is really good for that. The next one is a buttermilk, and similarly to like the last so many, this is a very soft one. You can see the contrast of the pigments, but unlike the others, like the past three that we've been doing, this one does have a really nice defined edge. So if you wanted to create a shape, you could. You would still have a bit of a soft edge, but it's not going to be as scattered as it would have been, say, with Daisy. So also this one, I wouldn't necessarily use it as a full-on color fill. It's going to take some time to build it up, but it will build up. Also, this one doesn't, actually I take that back. It does get bigger with different pressures and thinner with lighter pressure, of course. So that is a bit pressure sensitive. And again, a really good one for adding maybe like a harsh shadow where you want it to be more prominent, because it can be, and it's very like a defined shape rather than scattered. The next brush is called Gold. And now that I'm seeing this brush, maybe I should have used it on my gold illustration that I just posted. This one, again, it has like, whenever you first put it on the canvas, it looks like very clear, but then it kind of blurs out like you would like a chalk almost. And it's got that scattered like color variation, which is cool. Again, a good one for shadow. This has a bit more of a defined edge than like Daisy or Latte, and it does create a nice texture. It is a bit pressure sensitive, not necessarily as much as some of the others, meaning it doesn't get huge. It kind of stays within the sphere that you're working in, and you can build up color, and it doesn't take as long as some of the others. But again, this one has just a really good texture, so I feel like we wouldn't necessarily be using this to fill in something, because then you're kind of losing the texture. But really good. Again, I'm not sure about lettering with this one. I feel like this is definitely, all of these actually, I would say, are very much targeted towards illustration rather than lettering. The first, like looking at them all here, this bottom half right here, if you look at the side, you can see where I'm pointing. All of these have very, very soft edges, where the first two were a bit more defined, which might work for lettering or creating shapes with like very defined lines, but I feel like all of these are soft, and they're going to be better for natural organic things and just adding shadows and textures on top of maybe an already solid object. Next up we have Ginger. And Ginger is a really nice scattered soft brush. It's a soft brush, but it does have a bit of a more defined edge, I would say. This one is pressure sensitive too. The harder that I press, the darker it gets, and the more scattered the colors get, I would say. Again, not one to build up, but it does allow you to create some really nice depth. If you were like shading something, maybe a circle, a sphere or something, it would allow you to create really nice shadowing. Also, I feel like, again, this is one of those shades that's really good for adding texture to natural organic shapes. Maybe you're drawing a woody scene and you need some like definition in leaves just to kind of like give the illusion of a whole bunch of trees or something. I feel like this is going to be a really, really good one. Also, now that I'm playing with this one, I don't think I've used it as much as I should have. And I'm now thinking that maybe this would be really good to add to kind of my water creating brushes. Next, I keep wanting to say the next shade, and I feel like I have, so I'm sorry. I'm used to nail polish, and I'm like, the next shade. But in reality, the next brush is called Amber. And this one is a big brush. It is actually only set about a 27, 26, but it's pretty big. When you do it like full pressure, it reminds me of like the stucco on the side of a building. It has a really nice texture. So if you are into like building illustrations or things of that sort, I feel like this is going to be a really good brush for you, because it does give you a very realistic texture. Like when you zoom in, I feel like you can see the texture in the grain, and it almost like gives you the illusion of like a real building that has been stuccoed. Or actually you could use on bricks. Like there's so many options for this one. It just has a really good, once again, kind of natural organic like texture to it, which is really nice. It's not majorly pressure sensitive, like you can't get it super light. That's basically the main color form, and if you go harder, it just really gets bigger. So something to keep in mind with that one. Next up we have Marmalade, and Marmalade is reminding me very much of, what was that? Daisy and Cotton, where it's very textured. It just has a bit more of a defined edge, and I feel like if you were comparing it to this brush that I'm pointing out on the side of the screen, it's like the reverse. So where this one was lighter in the main part of it, this one's darker, and then it's got the lighter where the darker is, if that if you follow that. Pressure sensitive, yes, it gets bigger and it does get darker. And if you wanted to use it as a stamp, that's kind of like its stamp shape. So that's interesting. You could create some neat like texture with that. Actually, that would make a pretty cool cloud or bush, you know, in the right colors, of course. Because we are running out of room, I'm actually going to go ahead and shrink these up a teeny bit so we still have plenty of space to work with. Now I'm going back to the brushes. We are going to go on to blush. Blush, like here, looks like a really nice, nice edged textured brush. So again, good for shading. And that is, this one you actually might be able to get in lettering or something if you wanted to. It has a very nice flow to it. The streamline naturally seems really good. If I go full pressure, it does get pretty dark, but it still has like little scattered dots in it for adding a texture. If I go light, it's about the same color, and if I'm like at a slant, you just get more of the scattered white in there, but it's like the same intensity of the color that I'm using. And of course you can build it up, but you'll still have some scattered specks until you do about 3 or 4 like layers. So again, I feel like this is one that's just best for shading, not necessarily like filling an entire object unless you want the object to be super textured and have some peeking, like light peeking through, or whatever your background color is peeking through. I like that one a lot. Next up we have is berry. Now berry looks very similar to kind of like a cross between marmalade and blush, but berry I feel like has a bit more of a scattered edge we're gonna see. Definitely not as defined. Also, something to notice here is this one seems to have its opacity bar a little bit lower than 100%. What is that? About 80 something, I'm guessing. I know I moved it, but it's probably about 85. And it's starting out pretty small. Wow, so if that is actually a little translucent, then interesting. You'll definitely be able to, let's just turn that up. It was like at 85. It doesn't change a ton. I'm just guessing that would affect like the color that you're on top of. I'll go ahead and put it back to where it was, about 85. There. This one has a really nice texture. Again, it does have that scattered edge. If I were to like stamp it, as you can see, it's very like a full brush stroke. Again, makes really nice for like creating texture that's like natural. And when I say that, I mean like think like things in nature or building materials, just the elements. That's the elements. That doesn't even make sense. Just think like trees and bushes and building textures. I feel like that's what that would be really good for. The next brush is Pistachio. I love the names in all of these. I feel like they're really fun. So Pistachio, looking at it right off the bat, it looks like it's going to be a really good texture one. Another like building texture, but it has a little bit maybe of a soft edge, but not too scattered. And I feel like that is exactly, it actually reminds me very much of the brush that we just used. But I think if I stamp it, it's more of a square-based stamp rather than this one that we just did before, because it felt more like a circle. So you would probably get decent lines, but it is pressure sensitive. So if you wanted to create like a straight line or something with this one, you'd have to be very careful and make sure that you have the same pressure all the way through. Otherwise, it's not necessarily going to work. So as you can see, that straight line is a straight line, but it's not going to be the same all the way across because of this one being very pressure sensitive. Next up, we have Tawny. And we are running out of room, so let's go ahead and move up top here. Wow, okay, so Tawny's a pretty big brush, even though she's like not turned up fully on the size bar. If I'm like holding full force pressure, you can see she takes up like a lot of the space here. Very big and very pigmented, I guess you could say. You get a lot of color payoff whenever you're just doing one stroke, and I like the contrast of the white specks in it. It kind of reminds me of, let's see, the blush or berry possibly, but I also feel like this one has a bit more, like I said, if we were using real pencils here, this feels more pigmented, more waxy, more something to that effect, because you do get a very like major color payoff. Next up, we have Penny, and Penny looks similar to Tawny, but more of a scattered edge and possibly more wispy around it. Ah, that's like an exact, yeah, that's like the perfect description. So if you look at the line of this one, it definitely has like scattered dots all around, but at the same time, you are able to achieve a pretty decent line. That'd be really good for like a comet if you were doing like some space or sky illustration. It's like made up of a whole bunch of little dots, and towards the top of the brush it seems heavier, and then at the bottom it gets lighter, and that seems to stay consistent throughout all of the brush uses. So that would be a really good kind of shader if you could use that to your advantage. Like if you were wanting something to be lighter on the inside, darker on the edge, this would be a really good one to use to like take advantage of that. But of course you can build it up like this, but then you kind of lose the texture in the middle, so not like the best brush for filling shapes. Now we have Magenta. Magenta is a very, very round brush. I like a good round brush, and this one, again, it has a very soft feeling to it. It feels like the white and the blue, or actually the main color that we're using, I feel like they're very equals, but the white part becomes like a translucent version of the blue, because you can see through to the white, but it's very scattered. It's got like varying shapes in it too. It's not just all circles, whereas I feel like the last brush, you could definitely tell it was like little circles. This almost reminds you of like a watercolor on a very like a recycled paper or something to that extent. I kind of really like this one. Next up, we have Watermelon. Watermelon is very, very textured, and it does remind me of like the inside texture of a watermelon, so that is fun. But again, I know I mentioned stucco earlier for another brush. This is like a very, very, very like big textured stucco that you definitely wouldn't enjoy painting on because it would have like so many grooves. But I feel like that's really good. I noticed when I go like have my pencil going up and down, it seems to be very, very contrasted. When I go to the side, it actually stays about the same. I'm not sure what I did there that's different. But I feel like the contrast of the white and the blue here are very, very strong. And if I go kind of like light from the side, it seems to be a little bit softer. Or maybe that's just me imagining that. Very, very good texture. Next up we have Rogue. And this one is very soft. Wow. This almost reminds you of like a marker that is on its probably last leg, where it's kind of like fading out and not using, like there's not much ink left in the marker. And it's on the paper. It's still showing up, but you can definitely tell that you probably need a new one. But at the same time, it'd be really good for like coloring something that is supposed to be really soft and textured, because you're picking up that like paper texture and the pigment from the marker that's left. And I do like this one. You can overlap it to get some nice like more strong colors, but again, I wouldn't use this for filling it in. It is just meant for like a good texture. Then we have Rosewood, and Rosewood right off the bat, I don't know if it's just the name or the looks of the brush, but it makes me think that it should be like a good one for a tree trunk. Like I said, it could be the name just throwing me off, but ooh, that has a really nice texture. So as you guys can see here, if I move it around, it's got texture. The more that I move it around, though, the more that it does fill in, but keeps that like soft edge. So I actually feel like this would be really good for anything in nature, like I mentioned, like a tree trunk or something, or maybe you were doing some like grass or shrubs or bushes. I feel like this one has a really nice organic feel to it. And I ran out of room, but if I were to stamp it, it has a bit of like a rectangular shape. Then we have Salmon, which looks like a really good kind of add texture to the sky, add texture to the water vibe, because it's very scattered, soft edges, so you're not even going to notice that like it's a separate brush stroke from everything else, at least looking at it there. I feel like it's going to be a really good one. Okay, so actually I feel like this is a lot more put together than it looked like it was going to be. So it's going to be a good one for creating, I still think my original statement stands. Like I feel like that's going to be really good for like creating water or something to that extent, adding some texture in the sky. It does build up, and it has actually a pretty defined like edging line, but at the same time really good for like shading. If you go towards this like slanted, I feel like it's a little bit darker than if you do it with your pen right upright. The next brush is called Plum. And Plum is pretty large, very, very scattered. It is a roundish brush whenever you go to stamp it. Again, that's a really good like creating organic shapes, because the more that you go over it, they do kind of like layer and create some nice different depths with it. Definitely not like a lettering brush. This is definitely for adding texture, adding organic like features. And I think with as many times that I've said like natural and organic and adding textures to like nature things, I think that goes along really well with like the representation of what they show the box to be, because we see aquatic animals, we see kind of like marine life and plants and things that live under the sea. I feel like that just kind of goes with everything we've been talking about in this video. So I think that the pictures for this brush set are a very good representation of what they do. Next up, we have Colorbox, and this one is really very similar texture that we've been seeing overall, but it has a bit more of a defined edge. So if you want a more harsh shadow or a harsh texture without a scattered edge, I feel like this one's really good. Then we have Slate. Slate feels very it reminds me of like a composition notebook, if that makes sense, because we're pretty small. If we were to go big, we would get a much bigger scatter of like the different grains that we're seeing here. So again, good for shadows, good for textures, not good for like drawing a full-on shape with. Then we have Olive. We also have the fact that I'm running out of room. What's going on? It's like malfunctioning. I don't know what happened there. I need to shrink this up a little bit because we're out of space. Okay, sorry about that. Back to Olive. This one looks very, very soft and like a really good shader. Ooh, I have not used this one much, and now that I'm playing with it, I'm definitely thinking I need to. This would add really good kind of depth in a lot of natural scenes, because it's very, very soft. But as you can see, the more that I go over an area, the more like saturated that area becomes, but it also keeps others light. Very good. Not good for lettering, but very, very, very good for adding texture and shading. And I will go ahead and show you some examples of like places where I think this would be a really good brush. And then we have Juniper, which I have used quite often for some texture. This one, as you can see, is very interesting. It almost has like these fine lines in it. Also, almost reminds you of like working on like a recycled paper texture, or like a homemade paper that has like real elements in it. Like maybe you can see little grains from leaves or flowers, or just like recycled paper or things like that. It is very organic, natural looking like brush. Whenever you stamp it, it's kind of rectangular, I guess you could say, and it's just a really nice textured brush. So there is a look at all of the brushes in the Colored Pencil Studio from Eliza Moreno illustration, which is, I was confused there. I'm like, this is a Colored Pencil Studio. On the website, it actually does say the Colorbox Studio, but whenever I do import the brushes, it says Colored Pencil Studio. So just a note there, I was like looking at the screen over here, and that is different. So Colorbox Studio and Colored Pencil Studio are the same thing. They just have different names apparently on the website versus not. So when I was talking about the last two brushes that we looked at, like especially Olive, I want to just show you guys Olive again, where it just adds like this really nice, easy, like almost like self-shadowing look. I feel like this would be really, really, really good in pieces like I have been doing lately, where, let's see, this one, Like that sort of texture would be so good in the sky here because it would add depth to these clouds where they're clouds, but they're not like clouds that look like, oh yeah, I went and drew a traditional cloud shape. Like you just added texture to create the illusion of clouds. You made the bottoms darker by doing like those same movements that we were doing over here with olive to kind of create this like natural like looking element, which then can turn into clouds. Like that actually right now, putting it on a different background, it could look like a storm cloud. So I feel like there's a lot of natural benefits to these brushes. I feel like they're very good if you do a lot of outdoorsy illustrations, you use a lot of texture, and you're not looking for like harsh lines and fine lines. You are just looking for more soft, natural elements in your pieces. And lately, that is what I've been gravitating towards, as you guys can see from looking at these. It would also be very helpful in this sort of thing where I'm adding like grass texture back here, but I've got like water and sky, but then I've also got like these defined shapes over here. Just a lot of benefits whenever you are doing outdoorsy things when it comes to illustration, I feel like. So that is a look at the Colorbox Studio for Procreate by Eliza Moreno, or the Color Pencil Studio, whichever you want to call it. Both, I mean, they are the same thing. They just have different names apparently. They're great. I love them. It is one of, like I said earlier, one of like the top 3 brush packs that I use, and I do really enjoy them, and I feel like there's a lot of potential here. I don't use this set a ton because I tend to gravitate towards another one of Eliza's sets more, but now that I like refresh myself with these, I definitely want to go in and play with Olive more. And I want to play with Daisy and Latte. They just add a really good texture. And I feel like there's a lot of benefits to using these with blend modes as well. So if you guys like want some examples of like how to use these exactly, let me know, and we might be able to do a video like that where I show you like how I do the skies and how I create the clouds. But if that's also not something, no worries, we won't have to do that. But that is the brush set for this week. If you guys have any other brush set recommendations that you want me to review in the future, let me know. Drop them in the comments below. I will also have a link to this exact brush set in the description box if you are interested in purchasing them. I've had them for a year now. I really like them. And again, I feel like there's so many fun uses for these. And yeah, I think that is it. I do have another Eliza Moreno set, so there will be more brushes from her coming in upcoming videos. But yeah, I'm really excited to continue this series. I hope you guys have enjoyed it. And thank you so much for watching. And I will see you guys in another new video very soon. Bye!